Before the begins, please note there are links to all resources, the patch itself, impulse responses, and references in the video description. John Petrucci is known for his advocacy of the Mark series Boogie amplifiers, and, in his own words, attempting to build a metaphorical chocolate cake of tone.
Rich, satisfying, with a lot of body and depth, but just the right amount of icing on top. Must sound like chocolate cake.
Over more than 25 years of Dream Theater albums, his sound has evolved, though not by much, to keep up with advancing technology in guitars like extended range, and with subsequent signature DiMarzio pickups. There are many interviews where John explains how to get close to his Mark series tone. However, it is important to understand that the tone you hear on his recorded albums is documented as being the sound from multiple microphones mixed together, usually a 57 and 421 mix. When trying to recreate his tone in the GT-1000, and if you check my other videos, a lot of information is the same as the previous Boss GT-100 model, we need to keep this in mind. I.e., there are two tones we can shoot for. The tone going to a live-in-the-room speaker or amp, or the tone to use as mix-ready for recording. The prior will depend on exactly what type of power amp, speaker or cabinet you are playing though, and you may need to apply extra EQ via the main GT-1000 output EQ, or cycle through the AIRD output select options to find the best match for your amp. In this video I will focus on a mix-ready tone that equally will sound great in a mix, through headphones, or through true FR/FR speakers. Thankfully, it's well documented that John likes the raw sound of guitar directly into amp, without boost pedal complications or effects for his crunchy rhythm tone. We'll adhere to this method except for some creature comforts by way of some noise gates. The signal path therefore is the following. We start with a noise gate, progress to the amp itself, follow it with another noise gate, go through two EQ nodes, then out through the cabinet simulation. The noise gates are the two components of this patch that will require experimentation with whatever guitar and pickups you're using. I'm using an Ibanez guitar with EMG 707s, and these settings work for that. Just remember not to throttle down too much on the sound. We will of course be using the amp model BG Combo, which is the generic title for a Mark style amp inside the GT-1000. In terms of accuracy, the BG Combo is definitely one of the more accurate amp models inside the GT-1000, perhaps due to the simplicity of early Mark II C+ amps and widely available schematics. We can therefore treat it very closely to the real thing. Starting with the tone stack, a common theme along Mark series and driven tones is the need to remove most of the bass, especially when using hotter humbucking pickups. Don't worry if you feel like doing this would thin out the sound, because it will. However, we'll be adding bass frequencies back in a later EQ stage. John likes to scoop a bit of the mids on the tone stack. You'll note the sound at this stage is very mid-focused. Like the bass control, the final sound will be achieved via EQ, just like on real Boogie amps. The treble control will do two things. Firstly, it will obviously increase the treble frequencies of the tone. However, it also serves to boost the gain. The treble and gain can be played off each other to find the sweet spot. Presence can now be set to taste, giving you a sweep between dark to bright. I like to keep presence a bit lower for crunch and let the post-amp EQ pick up some of the shine. Sag can be broadly defined as how quick the amp is to respond to a given signal input, and generally, with all the tube amp models in the GT-1000, I set sag to its lowest, therefore fastest, setting at -10. Resonance is an important control in the BG Combo amp model. I find it's a tale of two stories, and either sounds great. You can start with either -10, or I go for +5 to +6. -10 will give you a very aggressive and tight sound, more modern maybe, but you'll sacrifice some bass thump. I tend to prefer +5 to +6. As you will see in the EQ section, we will actually use the resonance to address the frequencies at around 200 to 300 Hz, instead of boosting that signal via the EQ itself. Gain will obviously react to how hard the amp is being hit by your pickups, so dial this in between 50 to 85, depending on your pickups. With my EMGs, I go for about 85 on the mid-gain switch setting. The final shaping of the sound, in my opinion, makes the biggest difference and transforms an over-the-top mid-focused OK crunch metal tone into the super polished dry crunch tone boogies are known for. If you're not already aware, Mark series boogie amps have built-in graphic EQs that you can send a channel through. Seeing as the EQ settings are easily seen in several videos where John dials his tone in, you'd think that the EQ would be an easy process. However, it isn't. It turns out that the values on the EQ of real boogie amps are not that accurate. So instead, I found an article that details the real frequency bands and, more importantly, what the Q width is. Q width, for those not familiar, is how many frequencies around the selected frequencies are grabbed when we boost or attenuate. In the case of the GT-1000, we have two options here. We can approximate this EQ using a single graphic EQ block, or we can get finer and more accurate real-to-life control with a parametric EQ. I'll be using the latter approach, however this will also mean we need to use two EQ blocks to get the same result. The EQ settings are as follows. On the first EQ, we'll set the low mid frequency to 80 Hz, boosting this to about 8 dB. At the other end of the spectrum, we'll set what is here the high mid to 5 kHz and boost this to 6 dB. On the second EQ, set low mid frequency to 800 and scoop this by -2, and set the high mid frequency to 2000, boosting this by +2. There are a few things to keep in mind about this solution. The eagle-eyed among you may notice we've only set 4 bands of EQ. This is because the aforementioned 250 Hz range we've actually dialed in using the resonance control on the amp itself. I've set the Q, or the width of frequencies affected, to 1 for all of these settings. A Q width of 1 is very wide and should emulate the way that a graphic EQ would work. The largest change to the real-life tone is found in the 800 Hz scoop. In real life you would take out a lot more, and in this patch you can take out more for a more metal tone. I've kept the scoop quite low here because the impulse response we're using already has a very scoop sound to it. For this tone, I'm also not worrying about high or low cuts, as in my opinion this will be taken care of in the mix process anyway. The last piece of the puzzle is to find a good impulse response. I've linked to my favourite impulse response in the description. Right now, I've got this set to original, which means the GT-1000 is emulating the original speaker that came with the amp. The GT-1000 cabinet sim is excellent, and you can get a record-ready sound by using different combinations of mic and cabinet emulations. For that final few % of realism, however, nothing can beat a good true-to-life impulse response. In my case, I found a free diesel 4x12 cab and Shure SM57 impulse that sounds amazing with this tone. To activate it, first you'll need to load the impulse.wav file into the GT-1000 using the IR loader from Boss. I've linked to that download page in the description. This only takes a few minutes. Once you've done that, you'll be able to select the impulse response from the cabinet selection menu and the main out node, and doing so will disable the mic emulation. Make sure your AIRD output select is changed to recording, otherwise you'll not be able to use the impulse response. As you can see, the final sound is a great tone, ready for recording or live playback. I'd really recommend trying to listen to this tone via a proper FR/FR speaker in a decent acoustic room. It genuinely sounds as good as most real amps I've used. Please comment on what you'd change about the sound and how it responds to your pickups.